Welcome, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Derek McPherson. I'm a Vice President and Mining Analyst at Red Cloud Securities, Inc. Today's presenter is Sun Summit Minerals, a Canadian gold explorer/developer that's focused on its recently acquired Buck project in beautiful BC. Presenting on behalf of the company today is CEO Bob Willis and Vice President Technical Services Sharon Alexander. Welcome. The format for today's webinar will be as per usual. Sharon will provide an overview on Sun Summit and talk about the company's plans to advance the Buck project. Then we'll take your questions live. So please send us any questions. So send us all your questions, type them into the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can in the time allotted. To start with, we'll get the disclosures out of the way. For Sun Summit Minerals Corp., there may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I would direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of Sun Summit's corporate presentation, located on the company website. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. And we note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Specific disclosures for Sun Summit include, in the last 12 months, Red Cloud Securities has performed investment banking services or has been retained under an advisory agreement by the issuer. With the exciting part out of the way, we will get to the what we're all here for. So over to you, Sharon, and the presentation on of Sun Summit.
Great, thanks, Derek. Thanks for having us, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We're glad to have the opportunity to talk about Sun Summit Minerals and introduce you to the company. For some of you, you may have known us as San Marco Resources. We've recently changed the name from that. We did a lot of exploration in Mexico. And so we thought with the refocus in BC that we would change the name to reflect that focus. So that's basically the change there. Here's some cautionary notes about forward-looking statements that Derek had went over. So just to quickly go through Sun Summit Minerals and our Buck property. So we have our flagship Buck property in central BC. You can see on the map there, it's just south of the town of Houston. We're fully financed. We're in a good, strong cash position. We have the opportunity for year-round exploration, so we can drive right to site. There's excellent road access. We're close to towns and in a very mining-friendly region. We also have a very strong management team with a track record of success. So to go over some of our team members, let's start with Tukey Angus, who of course has been a significant industry player for decades. He's created significant wealth for investors, and he's been a part of several billion-dollar mergers. As well, we have Bob Willis, who is also on this call. Bob has made significant discoveries in his career, including Stibnite heap leach mine in Idaho, as well as part of the development team of the Silback Premier gold and silver property in the Golden Triangle. So Bob really excels at identifying prospective areas. Our discovery team at Blackwater, which we're using as a geological analog here at Buck. So Blackwater, he was with Richfield Ventures and part of the discovery team there. And so we're finding that Blackwater has a similar style of alteration and mineralization at Buck. So we'll be talking about that property in a bit. Also, Chris Gallagher with Rogue Geoscience. He's basically our technology guru. He brings a lot of years of experience in the field and in the office. Just to go over our share structure and finances. So we have about 50 million outstanding shares, about 3.4 million in the bank, and our market cap is around 15 million. So as mentioned before, we're fully financed for exploration and we're in a good financial position. So there's excellent infrastructure. You can see the Yellowhead highways there. There's also an all-weather access road which transects the per 22,000 hectares. So to go over the Buck property. So this is taken from one of those all-weather access roads facing east. And you can see the two zones which had the bulk of the historic exploration, the horseshoe and trench zones. So a lot of the historic drilling and trench out that the exploration that we did this summer soon. So the Buck property itself, it's a large altered breccia system, and there's a lot of continuous near-surface mineralization. We're looking at a potential bulk tonnage scenario here. There's been quite a lot of historic a database, and of course validated and model it in 3D. So there's been millions of dollars spent on the ground here. But this was kind of the last piece. So we identified a west-northwest trending structural corridor, which we think is a first order control on mineralization. And of course, in September, we started drilling our phase 2 program. We completed 10 holes so far for just over 4,000 meters. We also completed a 20-kilometer IP geophysical survey. Now, there had been a larger depth of investigation, so we're looking down to 300 to 400 meters IP chargeability. So those reds and orange and white blobs are the chargeability highs. So interesting targets coming out of the survey there. That's at a 300-meter depth slice. As well as the section, you can see that it shows some interesting structural controls. There's potential faulting and offsets of some of these chargeability highs. And as I mentioned, a lot of the historic holes were quite shallow. So there's large untested targets at this property, and it really shows the size potential. So to go over some of the rocks, so a lot of the core here is from our phase 1 program back in the spring, as well as a rock sample, a grab sample we took on site. So the Buck breccia complex, it's a mix of different styles of breccia, hydrothermal and magmatic breccias. There's a lot of cross-cutting veins. There's a lot of multiple phases of mineralization going through. Mineralization is seen both as disseminated. So if you look at the core photo along the bottom, that's an example of some disseminated mineralization through the breccia matrix. As well, we have quite a bit of higher grade gold appearing in fracture fills and veins. So it's a very dynamic and complex setting. There's a lot of fluids going through the system, multiple phases of mineralization. So that's really a good sign for this kind of system. So here you can see some core photos of our most recent drill program that we started in September. We don't have the assays back for this yet. However, if you look at the grab sample we took this summer in the upper left, you can see that rock graded at 4.7 gram per ton gold and 86 gram per ton silver. If you look at the core sample at the bottom, it has very similar styles of fracture fill mineralization. So we're very excited to see the results. We think, this could be really good returns. So we're really excited for those. So I mentioned previously that we were using the Blackwater project as a geological analog for Buck. I mentioned Christopher Leslie was part of the discovery team at Blackwater when he was with Richfield. The Blackwater project was then bought out by New Gold, and then later this year by Artemis Gold for $140 million. Artemis has been in the news recently. They raised a significant amount of money this year, and they're also going to start grade control drilling. So to go over the you can see just behind our photos there, Blackwater deposit is about 170 kilometers southeast of the Buck property. Now it has similar styles of alteration and mineralization that we're seeing as Buck. So we're using it as a geological analog. It also has quite a big footprint, and that's similar again to what we're seeing at Buck. If you look at some of the grades that they have at Blackwater, the recent proven and probable reserves, 334 million tons of 0.75 gram per ton gold and 5.8 gram per ton silver. So, and that's 8 million ounces of gold reserves. So if we go to some of the assays that we're getting at the Buck property, So these are significant intercepts from our phase 1 drilling that we completed in the spring. So we're looking at similar long intercepts of continuous mineralization, 50 to 100 meters of 0.5 gram to 1 gram gold, as well as some shorter high-grade intercepts. So this is very compatible with the bulk tonnage scenario, and we're seeing very similar grades to the Blackwater deposit. So just to show some pictures of our team and site. So we do have a shop in Houston where we do our core logging. We're very close to site. We can drive right to the drill. It's about 20 minutes. So we have a great logging setup, and we're really becoming part of the community in Houston. So in terms of the timeline, we really only acquired the Buck property in July of 2019. And we've had a very busy 2020. So we got our 5-year multi-year area-based permit. So we are fully permitted for drilling, trenching, trail building. We completed our first phase of drilling in March and April of this year. Our summer field exploration included sampling, geophysics, mapping. And of course, we started our phase 2 drill program in September of this year. And we've completed 10 holes so far. So we have had a very busy 2020, all while working within a very strict COVID-19 infection prevention protocol. We're very concerned about our employees' safety as well as the safety of the communities in which we work. So what's in store for 2021? Well, more drilling. We look forward to the results of the recent drill program, and we'd really love to see some similar intervals of the long continuous grade like we saw in phase 1. So just to go over the opportunity at Sun Summit Minerals. So it's an exciting time. We have ongoing drilling. Buck is showing real size and scale potential. We've identified multiple untested targets on the property. Year-round exploration, we can continue drilling at any time. We're fully funded. We're in a good financial position. We're in the discovery stage. We've done the work. We're just awaiting assays. So it's a great time for Sun Summit. So with that, I'll end it and open it up for questions.
Thank you very much, Sharon. That was a great overview. Looking to, so now I'll open up questions. As a reminder, at any time, please feel free to type your questions into the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. Maybe to start with, and you mentioned, Sharon talked about a little bit at the beginning, but maybe talk about, obviously, I said, well, Sun Summit is a new name. It is not a new company. And so maybe talk about, how you guys were able to acquire this project and why you chose to sort of refocus back into Canada.
Okay, thanks, Derek. I'll take that one. Yeah, San Marco was exploring in Mexico for over 10 years, and mainly in Sonora State, and pretty much focused on large porphyry copper gold systems, and currently still have 2 that are very, very interesting. And over the last couple of years, it just turned out that the permitting process in Mexico was changing somewhat, and it became fairly difficult to get titles to properties that were staked. And in Mexico, one of the prerequisites for getting a drill permit is you need to show titles. So it kind of became a bit of a stalling factor over a year or two, and so our board had a chat, and we decided that we would expand our jurisdictions and look in Canada and the United States. And so our Mexican subsidiary company is still there, still owns a couple of great porphyry copper targets. And so why the Buck property in British Columbia? Well, again, that would just simply when that decision was made to find assets in Canada. It was one of the first projects that I came across through a previous acquaintance of mine, and it was just going through the historical data on the property, and what really stuck out to me were these long intervals in the drill logs, and the assay sheets that we had as well, of long intervals of continuous gold and silver mineralization. So it wasn't, now you see it, now you don't type thing. It was very continuous. They were talking about breccias, they were talking about all this kind of thing. So, and the bulk of the drill holes, historical drill holes, were very short, 100 to 150 meters, and ended in mineralization. So really, that's kind of the crux of, we negotiated an option deal in the summer of 2019. And by the time we could actually get onto the property and do some surface work, it was into September, October, and snow started. So we didn't get a lot of surface work done in the end of 2019. And really, it was just a matter of, as Sharon said, there was really no drill core that we had confidence in that we'd go back and relog and connect what was in the written logs sheets to what we see in core. So that was really the root of why we drilled 4 or 5 holes in February and March, simply was to get fresh core and compare it to what was previously logged. Now, having said that, we got to remember the bulk of this work was done in 1960s and 1980s, and so the technology back then in understanding the models of the geology was kind of not where it's at today. And there was a lot of different geologists, if you will, of different levels of experience logging the core. So we really, on the Buck, we've gone back to step one. We're starting from scratch. But having this initial information, it's like a ball game. I think we've rounded first, we're heading to second, and we're hoping that not too far down the road, we'll look over our shoulder and the ball's been hit out of the park.
Yeah, and I guess in the 60s to 80s, 0.8 gram a ton gold equivalent deposits weren't exactly the target that people were looking for. And I think the success of Blackwater and the success we've seen with other large deposits have changed that view, and that there are good economics that can be wrapped around it. Obviously, COVID has had an impact on that phase 2 program. Maybe talk a little bit about the impact it's had on the phase 2 program, and then how much of the program is left to do, or if it's been completed, and then we'll talk about lab delays after that.
Well, I can handle the COVID question. So in terms of an impact, there's been a very minimal impact on the programs themselves. However, it took a lot of planning to get to that stage. We have some very strict protocols set up, so all of our team members are on board with this. So for example, our site, we can drive right to site. So that's one of the best things, is that people can take their individual cars and drive up. Our accommodation is spread out so that people aren't sharing accommodation and meal spaces. They can really stay separate within their work pod, for example. We do daily check-ins for health, just to make sure that they're not showing symptoms. As well, we have extra accommodation in case people do need to isolate. So it's been first and foremost on our mind, especially this year. We thought that it would be, difficult, but everyone's on board and cooperating. So, and we really have not had any problems implementing the COVID situation.
And of the phase 2 program, how much is left? Is it complete now, or is there some left to do?
Well, I think on the phase 2, I think we've done about 4,200 meters in the 10 drill holes, and that's just predicated on what we've done so far. So, I don't know that we've specifically stated a certain number of meters or a certain number of holes. So phase 2 is continuing, and obviously, I don't know if it's hole by hole, but as we get assay results in, that our 3D modeling will happen on a continuous basis, and I can see us just continuing to drill, I will say, for the foreseeable future. As Sharon mentioned, our all-in cost, that is all in, everything is, just under a couple $100 a meter. So, with our funding that we have so far, to think about us doing another 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 meters or whatever in the first, say, Q1 of of 2021 is not unrealistic. So, and where it goes from there, it's obviously going to be results oriented, but so far so good.
The more success you have, the more you get to drill, right? I guess on that question, obviously, balance sheet is in good shape, plus $3 million there. Where, and you said you could easily do another sort of 3 to 5 or 4 to 5,000 meters beyond what you've already done. Where does that money? Where's the current treasury sort of get you into next year? I guess depending on success and how aggressive you are, meters wise.
Right. So if we just do the math and say it's $200 a meter, we did 5,000 meters, that's $1 million. So, in our view, I just want to step back to just for a second, and we have this comparison to the Blackwater, and again, it's the geology and the styles of mineralization that is the simile. So what does that mean? I mean, we see disseminated pinhead to levee style sulfides. We see porosity infill where it's mainly in tuffs. It's like a sponge that's soaked up mineralizing fluids. We see polymetallic solid veins and veinlets. We see hydrothermal breccias, magmatic breccias, all that kind of stuff. And we see a footprint that is 1.5 kilometers plus in one direction, 1.5 kilometers plus in another direction. So the surface footprint is there based on what we see at surface and historical drilling. A key point is the structural corridor that Sharon mentioned on that one slide. I mean, if you look between the blue lines, it's about 800 meters between the lines, and those lines aren't finite. That's just a structural fabric that appears to be a control for mineralization. And one of the key things that we see at Buck are really, really intense faulting and structural related zones. So there's tens and tens of meters in some of our drilling we've just completed, going through fault zones that's totally blitzed. It's really even hard to tell what the rock type is, and is got lots of sulfide in it. So again, we have to kind of step back and think, what does another 5,000 meters of drilling do on this project? And we got a big volcaniclastic pile of rock here that basically is mineralized everywhere. It's just a matter of what is the grade, and that's the one of the key points of Buck, is that it's a very, very large mineralized footprint, and we just need to hone in on where some of the better grades. And I think on a Blackwater conversation, 0.75 grams per ton gold is what's reported as an overall gold grade. But of course, in that there's higher grade and lower grades sections. And I think Artemis has come out and said they've got a 7-year plan, I think for 7 years, that they're going to mine higher grade at 1.5 grams and stockpiling 0.3, 0.4 grams. So we see that at Buck. We see lots of 0.2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2 gram gold, but we just need to find out where is the higher grade areas. And one thing I wanted to point out on the Blackwater, I believe just a couple of days ago, it was announced that there was an additional 35 meters of very, very close space drilling is going to be done to intensify the density of drilling by 16 times. So that's a really good indication of how these breccia piles work. I mean, if you can imagine how the fluids are in place, it's just where the largest open spaces and faults where they got the most goodies. So, it was dozens of drill holes at Blackwater before apparently it was they kind of honed in a little bit about where they were really going on this. So we've got 10 holes done at Buck, and so we do another 10 holes or another 20 holes, we should be in really, really good shape about figuring out where the goodies are here. So we feel really confident with our geoscientists, and they've given us some good indications that I don't think it'll take us dozens and dozens and dozens of more drilling to really find out where the hot spots are.
Right, yeah, and as you said, you're just scratching the surface with the initial program. Obviously, lab delays are something. Pretty much all of my coverage universe has issues in the lab and delays coming, especially companies in BC. do you have any sort of view as to when you might get enough data back on first results to start to put out a press release? Is it a couple weeks? Is it a month? Or is it still really unknown?
Yeah, I'm just giving you my best guess. I don't have any solid evidence. I would think that in maybe 3 weeks-ish, we might have 3 or 4 holes to report. Say in the next 4 weeks, something like that. Okay. In all honesty, to have the entire 10 holes back, I don't see that happening before the end of December, which is only 6 weeks away. But I guess in reality, we started drilling in September, and our last, in the last hole that we're waiting for now, hole 10, if you will, has only been in the lab for like 2 weeks. So, okay. It's going to seem like a long time, but I would expect that we'll have a news release out on a few holes and within 3-4 weeks or less.
So maybe one release before year end kind of sounds like a reasonable outcome.
Yes.
And I guess obviously now with the stage that you guys are at, are the data that the lab gives back to you, obviously the not just the assays but the indicator minerals and things that you get from that. Is that something that's holding up your development of as you advance the phase 2 program? Like lack of information, I guess. Yeah.
Well, in some respects, yes. Having said that, we have a number of holes that I guess we call them, or our guys call them, no-brainer holes. So yes, it's lack of quick turnaround is kind of not helping us in real definitive vectoring, if you will. But this footprint is large enough that it's not making us stop in totality for the next 6 months waiting, scratching our head where to go. So yeah, we need those assays sooner than later, but it's not stopping us from continuing.
Yeah, and I guess the other point is that you do have you have one drill rig turning, and so that the information flow is a little bit slower. You're not getting too far ahead of yourself, I guess is the point.
And that's a good point. I mean, our permitting is in place, a 5-year area-based permit, and as results may dictate, we have the ability to go to a multi-drill program at Buck. We're not there yet. Again, waiting on these assay results to come in, but we have that ability. So it's not like we would need to wait, for example, to get approval to go to 2 or 3 drills. So I'm not saying we're going to do that, but we certainly have that ability.
Sure. Now you talked a little bit about the comparison to Blackwater, and I think that's a great analog for investors to think about. You guys sort of did it at a bit of a high level, but maybe in a little bit into detail. What are the geologic similarities between the two properties that give you guys the view that that Buck has that Blackwater scale potential? Because I mean, Blackwater's you mentioned the reserves in there, 8 million ounces of reserves, but there's almost 12 million ounces of gold in across all categories, and 122 million ounces of silver. So it is a monster scale project that those don't show up every day. And so, what gives you guys the view that Buck has that kind of scale potential?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think we probably touched on some of the points already, but I guess first, the surface footprint that we see is real. It's there's limited outcrop in some areas. However, there is some historical drilling over north of a kilometer footprint, if you will, in the north-south direction, that drill holes were drilled for 100 meters in what we see as mineralized breccia with grades comparable to Blackwater, and the drill hole was stopped. So it's not totally blind drilling in these areas. So that gives us confidence. If we step out, and we've already stepped out in this phase of this program, 300 meters plus to the north. So it gives us confidence that that third dimension we're looking for, obviously vertically, is real. As well as I think some of the other key comparisons I mentioned was the styles of mineralization, the disseminations, porosity, infill, veins, all the different types of breccias and the structural corridor that's really can be conduits for mineralizing fluids. Those kinds of things, and that if one was to read the feasibility study on Blackwater and go through the geology section, you're going to read exactly what I just said, like verbatim. So that gives us a really good idea of the style of mineralization, and the age of the rocks is the same. And I think we don't know where the engine is yet for this, for these mineralizing fluids. It's probably not too far away, but there's a heat source somewhere here that we may be getting close to. But in our 10 holes we have in the lab, we've got, if you figure out 4,200 meters on 10 holes, if we do the math, it can average 400 meters a hole. So we got some holes that are pushing 500 meters, and we are in mineralization. Grades don't know. So that gives us some real good confidence in the small area where we have drilled that this mineralized system is significant. So it's not like we drilled 100 meters and we drilled 300 meters of Zippo. I mean, it just is very, very similar to, again, taking some verbiage out of the Blackwater feasibility. I mean, pretty much everything's mineralized in Blackwater. That's what they have said. Well, we can say the same thing pretty much at Buck. There's pyrite mineralization everywhere. So along with that, there's sphalerite, there's marcasite. So we see sulfide mineralization pretty much everywhere. Within that, there will be subsets of gold and subsets of higher grade gold. They could be the structural intersections that could be key. It could be just the huge fault systems. It could be just simply where the tuffs are, the big sponge rocks that soaked up, 100 meters of this soaked up gold on a very, very even basis. So that's the kind of thing we're looking for, and we feel confident that the Buck system has the size ability to be similar to Blackwater. Now we just need to drill, and drill. And I can, again, in my conversations with Christopher Leslie, he would confirm that there was dozens of drill holes drilled at Blackwater before they had a hint of how things were working. So, we're not there yet, but we got a real good idea of the size potential of this thing. So.
Right. And I guess, obviously, the drill results speaking of drill results that you have in hand, the drill results from your phase 1 program were very good. Big, wide intercepts, all mineralized, that were mineralized. And I think that's important. And it wasn't, from my perspective, whenever I see big, wide intercepts that are mineralized, I like to look at the composites or what's included in there just in case. Okay. And obviously for you guys, it's just a big continuous intercept, which I think is important. Maybe talk about those drill holes, how they compared to sort of some of the historic data or historic holes that were at Buck, and then also how they compare to the early drilling at Blackwater.
Yeah, I can't get into specifics about the early drilling at Blackwater because I wasn't there, and right. But I this is just personal communication with Christopher Leslie. But as far as, and again, getting back to what was the original allure of the Buck for myself was looking at historical drill logs from 35, 40 years ago that had assays, and these were certified assay sheets that we got in the database that was continuous. And as you say, it wasn't 10 meters of something wonderful and then smeared over 20 meters of zero. There's very few, if any, assay sheets that have 001 gold or silver. I mean, there's mineralization pretty much everywhere. In the few holes we did last winter, it was the same thing, and we saw exactly the same thing. And you've seen those individual assays. Again, we don't have any assays yet for the 10 holes that are in the lab, but looking at the core and looking at what's being logged and looking at what we drilled in the fresh core in the spring, looks like, feels like. So and we're talking long intercepts of mineralization here. But I do expect that we will get a variety of grades throughout long intervals. So there'll be multi-gram down to half gram down, and that's how these breccia piles are. It just that's just how it works, and so that's what I expect.
Great. I think that's a good segue. I mean, I think we're all looking forward. You guys especially are looking forward to those drill results actually being available and coming out. It sounds like investors have investors and potential investors have something to really look forward to when they do start to finally come. I think maybe if you want to give a quick summary of why Sun Summit, and then I think we'll close it off there because we're out of questions.
Sharon, can you take that? I got it.
Sure. Sun Summit to us, when we thought of the name and heard the name, it just means new heights and new opportunities. So we think that really represents what the Buck property is, and also our move from Mexico to BC, for example. So we're starting fresh. We're looking at things with a new perspective, and yeah, good things are to come.
That's right, and everyone can look forward to those drill results, and hopefully we'll have you back maybe shortly after that to discuss those. I'd like to thank Bob and Sharon for taking the time to present today. I'd also like to thank everyone for tuning in and being on the call. Just as a reminder, we have a full slate of webinars coming up from Red Cloud into year end, and so please check our news and media page for that. And if you want to see the replay of this webinar, you can check that out there. Check it out there as well. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good day.
Thanks very much.